Today, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to talk to you about a topic that may seem at first blush to be a little out of left field. I have ported my video game Linux Tycoon, which previously only existed for Linux and DOS, to Android and Game Boy. Not Game Boy Advanced, not Game Boy Color, just plain old green screen original Game Boy. Yeah, I did. Why did I do these things? That is up for psychologists to debate in the years ahead, but I'm so excited about it. I wanted to talk about it for just a few moments today. Okay, to start with, if you want to grab all this, go follow the links wherever you're seeing this, or go over to lunduke.locals.com, and there's more links to where you can grab this. I am charging for it, but I'm not charging a lot for it. What I've decided to do is thus. I'm bundling together every Linux Tycoon game I've ever made, which is a bunch of them now for DOS and Linux and Windows and and now Android and Game Boy. Because who doesn't want a Game Boy version of a Linux distribution management game? Anyway, I'm bundling them all together in the Linux Tycoon Mega Pack that I'm charging $12 for. So you get $12, you get DRM-free versions of all these games for all these platforms. And if you are a Linux Journal subscriber, if you currently have a subscription to lunduke.locals.com. Did I say Linux Journal? Whoops, that was a slip of the tongue. Lunduke Journal subscriber over at lunduke.locals.com, you get 42% off. Which basically effectively means that if you become a Lunduke Journal subscriber, the cost of a month subscription gets more than deducted from the cost of buying this Linux Tycoon Mega Pack. So if you're thinking of getting the Linux Tycoon Mega Pack, become a subscriber over at the Lunduke Journal. Even if you're thinking, you know what, I'll only do it for a month. Do it for a month. Get all the goodies over there, which is like a ton of books and tons of exclusive videos and podcasts and articles and all that sort of thing, plus the really cool community. And you get that, and you essentially get it for free because of the discount. I've got a little coupon code in there for everyone who is a subscriber to the Lunduke Journal to go and grab the mega bundle for 42% off. Okay, moving on past that. So Linux Tycoon 3 originally started as a terminal game that had very colorful ANSI art, right? It was it could almost have been an old school BBS game, really. And it was a lot of fun. It's a very, very goofy game with like lots of weird events, like you're running your own Linux distribution and all of a sudden you now have a tactical nuclear warhead. What are you going to do with it, right? That might impact whether or not you get some more users. It's very random, and I wanted to initially port that over to Android. So I started down the road of porting it to Android, and it didn't go well. I didn't like the direction I was taking. I created some new graphics and artwork for it, and I didn't like the way the game was shaping up, so I shelved it. This was like a year or more ago. I shelved it. And then I thought, you know what? You know what would be ridiculous? Could I make Linux Tycoon for Game Boy? Now I have professional Game Boy Color development experience. So I've done this in the past. So I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll give it a try. Realistically, Linux Tycoon 3 is not a processor intensive game. It doesn't need fancy GPU acceleration. But the problem with the Game Boy screen is that it is only 160 pixels by 144 pixels. It is crazy small. And fitting enough text and iconography on the screen to actually make a Linux Tycoon 3 game proved to be very challenging. But after I played with it for a while, I found a way to do it that I think a lot of you will dig. And I'm like, you know what, this is pretty cool. So I finished it up. So I finished up Linux Tycoon 3 for Game Boy, at which point I had an epiphany. of how to do the Android version so that it provided a similar experience to what you get with the DOS and Linux version, but in an Android optimized way. So I set about rebuilding the Android version with that in mind, and eventually started finishing it up. And once I got it finished up, once I got the Android version all polished up, I thought this would be cool to sit down and write a series of articles, developer journals, of how I went about developing these versions for such distinctly different platforms, right? I mean, the code base for the Linux and DOS version is very, very similar. It's an almost identical code base. I had to make a few changes, which I'll go into in the dev journal that I'll be publishing. But most of it, 99+% of the code, is identical between DOS and Linux. The Game Boy version, no similarities whatsoever. like there's the code it's all brand new. The tools I used are completely different. The considerations for the artwork are totally different. It's just utterly and completely different. If you go to the itch.io page, where I've got the Linux Tycoon Mega Pack listed, you can see one of the title screen screenshots from Linux Tycoon 3 for Game Boy. And when you compare that against the Linux Tycoon 3 for DOS or Linux screenshot, you can see where I used this pixelated Tux the Penguin. I used that across all of the platforms. And it is, while it is the same shape and it is the same rough design, for obvious reasons, the color alone, it had to be completely kind of rethought. So you'll start to see some of that. Now, the Game Boy and Android versions are not out today. They're going to be out as I release the developer journals in the coming days. So if you go pick up the Linux Tycoon Mega Pack today, you get Linux Tycoon Classic, the original version I made for Linux and Windows and DOS, because there was a DOS version of Linux Tycoon Classic. I don't know. Backstory. This is backstory of a backstory. Linux Tycoon was originally conceived of as a joke. I was joking about it one day during a live stream of a podcast recording about how funny it would be to make a Linux distribution, simulation, and management game. And the people who were watching the live stream all unanimously responded that yes, they want to play that. And so I'm like, okay. So I sat down and I banged out the very first version of Linux Tycoon in like 48 hours, right? I just hammered this out. I put some custom artwork on it. I made it look kind of pretty, but it was a real simple, real rough game. And I released that one for Linux initially. I got a lot of feedback on it, and people really liked the game, but the game was clearly needed some work. So I came up with a 1.1 and a 1.2 and eventually a 1.3 release for Windows, and eventually I made a DOS version. And I made the DOS version in a completely different code base simply because I thought the idea of playing a Linux management game in DOS was very entertaining. I wanted to do it, right? Because I don't do a lot of coding anymore. I really don't. You know, I used to be a full-time programmer, and sometimes I get the itch to get in there and code. And so when I want to sit down and code, it usually is something that I find just amusing. Like it's usually not a serious project. Like I don't sit down very often and decide I'm going to code a new bootloader. No. I sit down and I create a Linux simulator for DOS, right? So anyway, so it comes with those, and then Linux Tycoon 3 is a whole different game. It's extremely goofy. It's sort of like a choose your own adventure, adventure-y title, kind of an almost a pseudo RPG sort of thing, where you have your own Linux distribution and you're competing against three other big systems, right? Three tongue-in-cheek kind of parody systems of Windows, Mac, and Chrome OS. And that's what that version was. And so that's available for download for DOS and Linux as part of the Mega Pack as well. The next thing that's coming is going to be the Game Boy version. The Game Boy version's coming in just a couple of days, and I'm going to release the Game Boy and the Android versions on the same day as their developer journals come out. Just because that sounds kind of fun to do it all at once. So I'm going to be releasing the Dev Journal and the Game Boy version of Linux Tycoon 3 here in just a couple of days. I need to put some more screenshots in the Dev Journal. I kept tabs and notes as I was developing it, but I need to format it and add a few more tidbits here and there. So that'll be a couple of days out. And then the Game Boy version will appear. If you pick up the Mega Pack now, you'll be alerted via a little email when the Game Boy ROM is available to download. It will just be as a DRM-free ROM that you can, obviously it's DRM-free, it's a Game Boy. But you can play it in an emulator, or you can stick it on a flash cart and play it on your actual Game Boy. It'll work just fine. Yes, it is tested on an actual Game Boy, so it does work. And then a couple days after that is going to be the Android version, again, accompanied by the developer journal for the Android version. The Android version is kind of fun because it's not going to be released on the Google Play Store, at least not initially. It's just going to be an APK that you can download from me and install on whatever devices you have. So if you have an Android phone or tablet that does not have the Google Play Store, no big whoop. You can still download and, quote, sideload the game onto whatever device you've got. And I will also be doing a dev journal on Linux Tycoon 3, the DOS and Linux version, which again kind of shares the same basic code base. So I thought it'd be kind of interesting to talk about the considerations that went into building it for DOS and Linux at the same time. So this is kind of fun. I know that this isn't going to light the internet on fire because, most people are not going to be super excited about a Linux distribution simulation and management game for Game Boy or having an Android version of it that isn't even available on the Play Store. But for me, this is a lot of fun, and I have a funny feeling that there's an awful lot of you out there that are going to feel the same way. Now, I've spent so much time getting the Android and Game Boy version really solid that I can't just release it for free. I've got to charge something for them in order to, in the future, be able to justify doing more stuff like this. And so I set the price really, really, really ridiculously, stupidly, obnoxiously low. And I'm offering that 42% discount, because 42 is a wonderful number, for any Lunduk Journal subscribers. That way it's even lower. I would make it free for all my Lunduk Journal subscribers because I love you guys, but I can't make it completely free, or I can't justify doing any of these in the future. Like, it just took up so much of my time. Like this, it was so many weekends were spent coding, especially the Game Boy version. It took me a long time to get the Game Boy version right. And I'll go into it in detail, but a lot of it really wasn't necessarily the code that was so difficult as the design and the art and all of that for the Game Boy. It was incredibly difficult to cram everything into that 160 by 144 pixel screen with only a few shades of green, essentially, shades of gray, however you want to look at it, to work with. And so I found that just incredibly challenging. I had never made a game that was this text focused and that needed this amount of information presented on screen at once on a Game Boy. And so it was kind of a fun challenge. So go to lunduk.locals.com and pick up a subscription, and then grab the game, because that's the cheapest way to do it. I recommend doing it now. That way you're alerted the moment both the Game Boy ROM and the Android APK are available for download in the coming days. And you'll also, because you'll be subscribed over at lunduke.locals.com, you'll get the developer journals. Those developer journals, I think, are going to be at least partially subscriber exclusives. Some of the bits of it will be free for everyone to enjoy and share, but I go into so much detail that they're rather lengthy. And I'm making at least a good chunk of each of those articles subscriber exclusive. So you want to get the subscription at lunduke.locals.com if you don't already have one, and then pick up the games. If you want to enjoy the dev journals, but don't have any interest in tinkering around with Linux Tycoon 3 for Android or for Game Boy, or playing the DOS version or anything like that, you don't have to buy the games, but you still want to grab the subscription, because then you'll get all the dev journal stuff. So go do that, and your life will be significantly better and nerdier because of it. All right, everyone, that's it. I just wanted to talk about this because I'm really excited. I'm really excited, and I have a request, a very, very humble request. In the coming days, when Linux Tycoon 3 for Game Boy and for Android ship, I want as many pictures of it as you can send in. So if you can put it on a Game Boy, put it on a Game Boy Color, put it on another sort of device with a Game Boy emulator, run it on your Android phone or tablet, and then take a picture of you out in the world playing Linux Tycoon 3 on a Game Boy. Oh my goodness, would that just make my day? That would literally just make my day. It's a humble request, I know, but I would love to see pictures of it. It would just tickle me to no end. Because as I was making this, I kept imagining people like sitting in a Starbucks holding an original generation Game Boy, right? And playing Linux Tycoon 3, which, by the way, has ridiculous music and sound effects. Ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. But I like it a lot. I think I won't give anything away, because I think the first time you'll play it, you'll laugh. So I'm not going to give anything away on that right now. But it is utterly ridiculous. If you do go to a Starbucks to play Linux Tycoon 3 on a Game Boy, turn that volume up. That's all I'm going to say. All right, everybody. Thank you again for all your support. Thank you for being so amazing. And now I return to you to your regularly scheduled interviews, articles, and other awesome programming. That is all.